Before we start the next section, I would love to share with you, when I became conscious of showmanship, there's one quote in the world of magic that revealed to me the skills I needed to learn. And the quote was this. The quote said that, it was by a magician named Robert Houdin, who said, "Magic, a magician is just an actor playing the part of a magician." And I thought it was fantastic. So I thought that, to become a better magician, I need to go learn acting skills. I need to go to theatre. So I actually did a couple of years of theatre, did a couple of years of vocal classes too. And my first vocal class was with my singing teacher, and I'll forever remember this experience. I remember walking into the room, and she was sitting there with a piano. She was a bit elderly, and she didn't even look at me. So she just goes, "Come in." So I kind of go, okay. So I come in, and I sit down, and then she goes, "Sit down." She goes, "Tell me how you feel, young man, after this." And then she plays one key on the piano, non-stop, for at least 3 minutes. I was just like, what the hell is going on? And then she turns around and she goes, "How do you feel, young man?" I was going, actually a little bit frightened. I feel like this is The Exorcist going to happen now. And she says, "Good." She goes, "Good." And now she turns around again. She goes, "Listen to this." And then she plays this beautiful song called Romance, about 3 minutes in length. And then she turns around, she looks at me this time, and she says, "How do you feel now?" I said, "Actually quite sad. It was actually a really traumatic song." And she goes, "Vin, what you don't realize, what most people don't realize, is they go through their entire lives speaking like this, with just one key, not realizing that they've got 88 keys on their piano. I'm going to teach you how to play like this." She was quite expensive. I gave her a lot of my money, but she changed my life. And who better to start off our day officially than a vocal master, someone who understands the voice. And that's who I want to introduce you to. This is Melissa Trinkman, who's one of the best singing teachers in California. And we have the pleasure of having her today. So please, can we give her a big round of applause as she comes on stage?
Thank you. All right, I'm going to grab this. Hello. Thank you for that great introduction. I love that story. My name is Melissa Trinkman. As Vin said, I'm a singing teacher. That's one of my jobs. I work with people to help them reach their vocal potential, you could say. I've been training my own voice, though, for over 20 years. I'm an opera singer, so if any of you have ever seen an opera, I sing with the Los Angeles Opera. Opera's kind of like the Olympics of the voice, I would say. It's the type of singing that takes the most amount of training. So when I'm not singing with the opera, I'm a voice coach. I also am a student. I'm working on my doctorate in vocal performance at University of Southern California. Yes, you can get a doctorate in singing. Who knew? But one of the things that I do there is I study vocal pedagogy, which is the art and science of teaching about the voice, or teaching singing. And so a lot of people, when they find out I'm a singing teacher, they say, "Can you really teach anyone to sing? Is it really possible that anyone can sing?" I always say, well, if you can speak well, you can sing well. But that's kind of a big if, because a lot of people do not speak well. And I include singers in that category. And in fact, a lot of singers, when they have vocal problems, it's not because of the way that they're singing, it's because of issues in their speech. So yes, anyone can sing, but invariably when I'm teaching a voice lesson, I'm teaching someone to sing, I'm also working on their speaking voice at the same time. And then when I'm working with a speaker on their speaking voice, little do they know it, but I'm also training them to be a singer. So it's kind of fun to get to see how the singing voice and the speaking voice interact. But today I wanted to start with a question for all of you. How many of you, when you hear your voice played back for you on a recording, don't like the sound of your voice? Oh my gosh, almost everyone. So that's pretty typical, actually. You know, studies have shown that people, when they hear their own voice, they, first of all, don't recognize it, and they don't like how it sounds. So my follow-up question, of course, is how many of you have actually been trained how to use your voice? Okay, so pretty much no one, which is so fascinating because, as Vin said, the voice is the instrument, is an instrument. It's one of the most complicated musical instruments there is. But we're never taught how to play it, right? It's as if I were to hand you an instrument, let's say a violin, and I said, play me a song. You wouldn't be able to play me a song, right, on the spot. Even if I left you alone with that instrument for days, weeks, months, years in our case, right, with our musical instrument, you're not going to be able to fulfill the potential of that instrument unless you receive some guidance, some instruction, right? I think we can all kind of see that. But then we're born with this incredible instrument, and it's so unique, and it's so interesting, and it's got all of these components, but we're never really taught how to play it. And if you want to be able to influence and engage people when you're speaking with your words, your voice is your most important tool. Most people, when they're getting ready to give a speech or a presentation, they spend so much time working out the content of what they're going to say, right? The outline, okay, what statistics am I going to use? What's my content, right? It's all about the content. But then the delivery kind of gets left to the last minute, or we just say, I'll just wing the delivery. But there's substantial evidence that shows that actually the delivery of what you're saying is at least as important, if not more important, than the actual words that you're saying. So today, we're going to talk about the delivery, and we're going to talk about our voice, and I want to give you some tools so that you can start to unlock your own voice, and then hopefully set you on a journey of discovering your voice and learning to maximize its potential. Good breathing is so essential for good vocalism, right? In the singing world, it's very common for voice teachers to say 90% of vocal faults have to do with the breath or a faulty breath. And I would say that actually is true in speech as well. So if we attend to the breath, if we fix issues with our breathing, a lot of the other technical problems that we encounter are automatically solved. So we want to make sure that we could spend a whole weekend just talking about breath, but we're going to condense it, and I'm going to give you the most important nuggets. Good breathing for your voice is going to make you sound more steady. It's going to make your voice sound rich and resonant. It's going to make your voice sound more beautiful. Because a lot of the time, if we have any sounds that are not pretty, it's because the breath is stuck. It's also going to be one of the biggest determinants in if you sound confident and if you sound polished when you speak. So it's pretty important. When you walk into a room, the most powerful person in that room is the one with the most relaxed breath, because they're the one that's going to make the best decisions. So we want to kind of first map out where the diaphragm is, because a lot of people, and singers included, so many teachers say, sing from your diaphragm, breathe from your diaphragm, use your diaphragm, but then they have no idea where the diaphragm is. It's actually a little higher than we would think. The diaphragm's kind of like an umbrella-shaped muscle underneath the lungs. So what happens is that when the diaphragm descends on the inhale, it moves we could say our guts out of the way, and that's why we feel that sense of release and expansion here. So we can't actually feel the diaphragm, we're feeling the effect of the diaphragm on our body. So we could call it a belly breath, because we're going to feel a little expansion in the belly. So just kind of put your hand on your belly, kind of a little bit of your lower belly, and I want us to see if we can kind of get in touch with this diaphragmatic breath. So what I want us to do is I want us to do what I call a whispered ah. It sounds like this. As you do that, what happens to your stomach? It goes in, right, exactly. It's an innie. So we're going to do that whispered out. I always like to start with the exhale, because if you exhale well, the inhale takes care of itself, right? So we start with the exhale, and what I want you to do when you get to the bottom of your exhale, you've exhaled, let's say, 85% of your air. We don't want you to exhale all of your air. Actually, it's impossible to exhale all your air, but we're going to exhale mostly, and then you're going to wait just a second at the bottom of the exhale. Wait for that urge to breathe, okay? And then all you do is you let that belly release like you're filling up a small balloon in your stomach. And if you want to start by breathing through the nose, some people find they're able to get a more relaxed automatic breath through the nose. That's completely fine. Eventually, you're going to want to train yourself to also breathe through your mouth, because when you're speaking, you don't really have time to breathe through your mouth or through your nose. It's mostly going to be through your mouth, but feel free to start with the nose. So does everyone feel that? So the little cheat sheet is that the exhale is the innie, the inhale is the outie. And so one little pitfall of this is you have to be okay with letting your gut fall out, right? So we're in LA, everyone's like holding it in, right? Or you know, as women, a lot of times I think we feel this pressure to keep this sucked in. But then you're never gonna get a diaphragmatic breath, because you're not allowing, your abdominal muscles are tightening and not allowing the diaphragm to do its thing. So we kind of have to let those ab muscles release. And if you have a six-pack, anyone here have a six-pack? That, you know, it can be sometimes a little tricky to let the abs release. But so we're going to do a couple little exercises to practice this diaphragmatic breath. So we're going to first start with a shh. Can you all try that? Shh. And do a couple in a row, practicing the in and out of the belly. Good. Can you make the sh a little bit now more intense? Shh. Right. So one of the ways that we increase volume is through the use of our air. And I want you to think of this as your accelerator. It's like your gas pedal, right? So you can go shh, right? Depending on how you want your voice to sound. So let's try the hiss now. Same idea. Ready? And do a couple in a row. And you're really working on your inhale being automatic, right? It's like a reflex. It's not something that you have to think about. And I never want any of my singers or speakers to think about getting a big breath. That's one of our pitfalls. Almost every singer has that a little bit mixed up. It's not about a big breath, because a big breath actually creates more tension, but it's about a deep breath. And if the breath is deep and small, it's going to be good, and it actually will be bigger than what you were saying, a clavicular breath from the shoulders. So, excuse me. Okay, so now let's put our voice with it, because the S and the sh were unvoiced consonants. If we do zzz, you're adding the voice online. Try it. Good. You feel it coming in the whole time you're doing the Z? That's really important, so that we make sure that we're feeding our voice that steady stream of air. Zzz. And the more steady your output of air, the more steady your Z sound is, the better control you have over your voice. So that's what you're going to work on. All right, how about let's try a V. Good. And now, when we speak, we're going to do the same thing. So I wrote that phrase. As I'm talking, my stomach is coming in. So we're making sure that we're giving gasoline to our voice, right? Or electricity to our voice. all the time. We never want to be speaking just from the throat. If I'm just talking up here from my throat and I'm not using my breath, the sound is not going to be as smooth and even, okay? So, breathe before you need to. Someone had a comment about not knowing when to pause. So I'll say, we're going to breathe at least at the end of every sentence, right? But one of the magic things about communication, which I'm sure you're going to talk to Vin a lot about, is you can breathe anywhere as long as you come up with a reason to do it. And often, where you place your breath can really enhance your message, right? So feel free to breathe in the middle of a sentence. It's fine. But what we don't want from a technical standpoint in terms of breathing is to be one of those people who just keeps talking and they have so many things in their mind that they just keep talking and they go and they go and they go until they and then they are forced to take a huge gasp breath, right? It sets off the whole mechanism in kind of down a bad path. So we want to breathe before we need to, not at the point where it's like, oh wow, I really need to breathe. I'm in trouble. So now let's all stand again. And we're going to all speak this paragraph, and we're just going to focus on taking those low breaths. Again, they don't need to be big. This is not about amount of breath, because remember, you can breathe whenever you need to. And I want you to notice, is your breath quiet? Do you take enough breaths? Do you feel the engagement of your stomach so that you know you're using your breath? Okay? Let's go. Try it. Great. Anything that you noticed? This sometimes can be a little bit tricky when you become aware of something that you've been unaware of, right? So we're all of a sudden putting a spotlight on our breath and it feels like, oh, am I doing it right? So that's normal. What I would suggest is that if you're interested in practicing this, you take a book and practice reading from the book, taking pauses and making sure that you're using your breath the whole time. So you feel this sensation of breath engagement. Some people would call it breath support, if you've heard of that term. Okay, so you can sit again. As opposed to, if we don't use our breath, and if we are locked here, the sound starts to get a little bit stuck. And also, you're not going to be able to create that steady stream. In music, we would call it a legato line, because the breath isn't infusing your speech with energy. So it's another way to say energized speech. Does that kind of make sense? So I'm trying to think of an example. Think of an example. If I'm not using my breath and I'm locked here, all of a sudden my throat has to lock as well. Same thing in singing. If we're not fluid with the breath, everything goes into the throat. So most of the time, if you hear people talking with like a strained quality, even sometimes, a nasal quality, a quality that's too high-pitched, it's because the breath isn't relaxed. Because there's also another thing that happens with the breath. When you take a low breath, it actually relaxes your throat. It's called tracheal tug. So the diaphragm actually tugs on the trachea to pull it down so that it's not like this. So there's tracheal tug, and then that fluidity of breath keeps the throat open and relaxed.